The wind cut through the old cemetery like a whispered warning, bending the tall grass and rattling the dry leaves against cracked marble stones, and in that uneasy moment, as the sun struggled to break through heavy gray clouds, Daniel Carter felt a presence behind him that made his chest tighten for reasons he couldn't explain. He had come here 100 times before, always alone, always heavy with memories, but this time was different, and before he even turned around, his heart somehow knew that something was about to change forever. Before the story pulls you deeper into this moment, take a second to pause and breathe it in. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet power of human connection, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories like this, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Your support helps these stories reach hearts that need them. Daniel Carter was 38 years old, a single father with tired eyes and a back bent not just from work, but from years of carrying grief he never learned how to set down. His life had narrowed into a careful routine centered around his 8-year-old son, Noah, who was the reason Daniel woke up every morning even when he wished he didn't have to. Daniel worked long shifts as a maintenance supervisor at a rundown apartment complex, the kind of job that kept food on the table but left little room for dreams. Since the night his wife Emily died in a sudden car accident, the world had lost its color for him, and the only place he allowed himself to feel the full weight of his pain was here, at his father's grave. His father, Robert Carter, had been a quiet, disciplined man who believed in showing love through action rather than words. They hadn't always agreed, and Daniel carried guilt for the years he spent too busy chasing his own life to really listen to the man who raised him. When Robert passed away from a heart attack just months after Emily's death, Daniel felt as if the ground beneath him had completely given up. Now, every Sunday morning, he brought fresh flowers to the grave, stood in silence, and wondered how he was supposed to raise a child when he himself felt so broken. That morning, Daniel knelt down, brushing dirt off the engraved name with careful fingers, his breath fogging the cold air. He was thinking about Noah's upcoming school performance, about how he still hadn't figured out how to smile without forcing it, about how loneliness had become a permanent resident in his chest. That was when the sound of footsteps disturbed the stillness behind him, slow and deliberate, stopping just a few feet away. When Daniel turned, he saw a woman standing there, dressed simply in a dark coat, her hands folded tightly as if holding herself together. She wasn't young, but not old either, her face lined with the kind of sadness that came from living through things no one should have to endure alone. Her eyes were fixed on the gravestone, not on Daniel, and there was something unsettling about the familiarity in her gaze, as if she had stood here many times before. Daniel felt a wave of confusion and mild irritation, because this grave felt like the only thing in his life that belonged solely to him. He considered saying something, asking who she was and why she was here, but before he could gather the strength, the woman slowly shifted her attention toward him. Her expression changed when their eyes met, and what Daniel saw there made his breath catch. It wasn't surprise. It was recognition. The woman told him that she had been looking for him for years, and that sentence alone felt like a stone dropped into the still water of his life. Daniel's first instinct was disbelief, followed closely by suspicion. His world had become small and guarded, and strangers didn't just wander into it with life-altering claims. Yet something in her trembling voice and tear-filled eyes told him this wasn't a lie meant to harm him. She explained that her name was Margaret Lewis, and that she had known his father in a way Daniel never did. As she spoke, the cemetery seemed to fade, replaced by fragments of a past Daniel had never been allowed to see. Margaret shared that decades ago, before Daniel was even born, Robert Carter had saved her life during one of the darkest chapters she had ever faced. She had been a young woman then, trapped in an abusive home, pregnant, terrified, and completely alone. Robert had been her supervisor at a factory job, a stern but fair man who noticed bruises she tried to hide and fear she couldn't mask. One night, when Margaret showed up at work injured and desperate, Robert didn't turn away. He helped her escape, found her shelter, and paid for her medical care without ever asking for anything in return. When her child was born prematurely and didn't survive, Robert stayed with her through the grief, sitting silently in hospital waiting rooms, making sure she ate, making sure she didn't disappear into herself. When Margaret finally left town to start over, Robert made her promise to live a good life, and she carried that promise like a compass ever since. Daniel listened as if the air had thickened around him. He had never known this version of his father. The man he remembered was quiet, distant, and sometimes harsh, but hearing this story cracked something open inside him. Margaret told him she had searched for Robert years later, only to find out he had passed away. She came to the grave whenever she could, not to mourn, but to say thank you to the man who saved her when no one else would. Then Margaret said something that stunned Daniel so deeply he had to grip the edge of the gravestone to stay upright. She told him that she had been watching him too, from a distance, ever since she learned Robert had a son. She had seen Daniel struggling to juggle work, grief, and fatherhood. She had seen Noah playing alone at the park, his laughter echoing with a hint of sadness. And she told Daniel that his father would be proud of the man he had become, even if Daniel couldn't see it himself. For the first time in years, Daniel felt his carefully built walls collapse. He realized that the kindness his father showed Margaret wasn't a secret miracle, but a reflection of the values he had tried, imperfectly, to pass on. Margaret wasn't there to take something from him. She was there to give something back. She offered to help, not out of obligation, but out of gratitude and love for a man who had changed her life. In the weeks that followed, Margaret became a quiet presence in Daniel and Noah's lives. She helped with school pickups when Daniel worked late, cooked meals that filled the apartment with warmth, and listened without judgment when Daniel finally allowed himself to talk about Emily and Robert. Noah grew attached to her quickly, drawn to the gentleness in her voice and the way she made him feel safe. Slowly, the apartment that once felt empty and echoing began to feel like a home again. Daniel's challenges didn't vanish overnight. He still struggled with exhaustion, with grief that resurfaced unexpectedly, with the fear of failing his son. But now, when life felt unbearable, he remembered the lesson his father had lived by without ever preaching it. That one act of kindness could ripple across decades. That helping someone didn't require perfection, only presence. And that asking for help wasn't a weakness, but a bridge back to humanity. Margaret eventually told Daniel that she didn't see herself as replacing anyone in their lives. She was simply honoring a debt she could never fully repay. Daniel, in turn, began to understand that family wasn't always defined by blood, but by the people who show up when the world feels too heavy to carry alone. As the seasons changed, Daniel found himself returning to the cemetery not with sorrow, but with gratitude. He stood at his father's grave one bright afternoon, Noah's small hand wrapped tightly in his, and felt peace for the first time in years. He finally understood that his father's legacy wasn't just the life he lived, but the lives he touched in silence. If this story has stirred something inside you, if it reminded you of the power of compassion and the unseen impact of small acts, please take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who needs encouragement, and leave a comment to let us know you felt it too. Your engagement helps keep stories like this alive. Before this story ends, we would truly love to know your thoughts, so please comment below with a heart if you believe kindness can change generations, and let us know what part of this story stayed with you the most. Daniel Carter never became a perfect man, and his life was never free of pain, but he learned that healing didn't come from forgetting the past. It came from allowing others to walk beside you through it. And somewhere beyond the quiet rows of gravestones, beyond loss and regret, the legacy of a good man continued to breathe through the lives he saved, the son he raised, and the love that refused to fade.